I was lying to myself. And that's one of the things I think we need to recognize. And one of the things I recognized that helped me turn this stuff around was just that I was telling myself a lot of lies that I was believing. And until I started to tell myself the truth and realize what was going on, I had no chance to really turn it around.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. What's up, my friends? Welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, Create Your Career. I have a high-speed, just full automatic send of information today in this podcast today. I'm absolutely humbled to have the #1 podcast on Apple. That host is Alec Lace, and he hosts First Class Fatherhood. We covered a variety of topics. They were all really good. Very, very excited to share this podcast with you today. He's interviewed some of the most incredible fathers from across the planet. One of my questions to him was, what is one of his most favorite things or themes that he's learned and picked up in interviewing all of these people? So stand by for that. And he answers a lot of the questions that I ask of my guests in a very unique way that only another person that has experienced and talked to so many people across the world in this capacity would answer. So why do you like helping people? That's one of the questions he even answered before I asked it. How do you stay current in your education? All these things that are regular themes in this conversation were covered in such a great manner. So I really look forward to this. Remember, you can find this podcast on kristoflewis.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast listening app. And you can find me on Instagram at Kristof Lewis. The best way to help this podcast out is to share it, rate on iTunes 5 stars, tell me what you like, and just thank you so much for your time. I never take it for granted. Have a great rest of your day after this podcast, and remember to apply what you hear on this podcast. Don't just listen to it, and I guarantee you will see results, especially after this one. So without further ado, welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, Create Your Career.
Yeah, Kristof, it's an honor to be here, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was just telling you a second ago off camera, I think it's so cool to be able to connect with other podcasters. I know how much work it takes to do everything in the background. I know how much work it takes to do every little intricate piece of the puzzle. And a puzzle, it seems a lot. So to be successful in that, to have some of the people that you've had on there and to do it so consistently as another podcaster, it's really motivation. It's really full of inspiration for me. And I'm really humbled to have you on here. It's really cool. But before we get into the rest of the episode, I'd love to hear more about who you are and what you're doing and some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, very simply, I'm a 39-year-old father of 4 children. I've been married for 15 years. And I got the idea to start this podcast, almost 2 years ago now, just because I'm a full-time railroad mechanic. I've been doing that for 20 years now. And on the side, I've always had, a side hustle from being the super in our apartment building years ago to having like a little side vending machine business. And one of the things I always did was always drive a cab part-time on the side. And so I transferred over to Uber a few years back.
Okay.
And just from listening to so many of the young men having these conversations, like every time they would ask me, oh, you have kids? And I would say, yeah, I have 4 kids. They would always look at me like I had 4 heads. They'd be like, wow, 4 kids. How do you do that? And everybody has this like false philosophy that like having a child means the end of your life. It means you're going to be broke. It means your life's going to be, you're never going to get laid. You're never going to have fun. So this seems to be that stereotype amongst the young men today. It was really driving me nuts. So I was looking for an outlet to set the message straight here. And that's where I, launched the podcast and put the message out there.
Yeah, I love that introduction because what that introduction does is cover the #1 reason why I want you to have it on the podcast, because I focus on careers. This is the Kristof Lewis Podcast, Create Your Career. And the fact that you're going out there and you were so dedicated to your job, you said you were a railroad mechanic and you were taxiing and then Ubering, but then you're doing this podcast, which we described in the beginning, takes so much of your time and a lot of effort. So you're being able to do all this stuff. And then while you're able to do all this stuff, you're able to recognize all these stories that you're hearing as you're meeting these people, and then you're be able to formulate that into what the podcast is today. And I do agree. When I talk to Aaron Singerman, I don't know if you've had a chance to speak with him, but he would be great.
Yeah, I've had him on.
Okay, I was going to say he'd be great for your podcast. But he said, kids made me rich. My kids made me rich. And it goes against all of those things that you had been saying about what people thought about kids and children, was that it makes me poor and this and that and this and that. But he said, because I have kids, essentially, I now have this work ethic that I've never had before because I want to provide for them. And I just thought it was the most incredible answers I've ever heard. So going back to why I wanted you on here, it was that exactly, because a lot of times one of the chief complaints that I hear through my podcast is that people don't have the time to do things. So I want people to recognize Alec's story here and see that you've done all of these things that you've described to us, and you've been able to not just, it's one thing hearing that and then like not processing it and not doing anything about it, but you've done something about it. So, I mean, what was like the shifting gear between you hearing all these things and then being like, I'm going to start a podcast on it? I know you described it a little bit, but like what really set you off to want to create something like that?
Well, I mean, it really was a build-up over a number of years, Kristof. I mean, I'm a recovering alcoholic and an addict, and I went through a lot. I mean, managing my time didn't come easy. I was always one of those guys, too, that couldn't have the time. I was always busy drinking, getting high, gambling. I mean, I was, addicted to, multiple vices. So this happened over a long time. I started to change my mindset through reading, because one of the times I stopped drinking, I'm compulsive by nature, and I picked up reading, which I had never read a book in my life. And I picked one up to try to get something to grasp my mind. Now I read a book every week, and I love that you post up there that you have that one book a week challenge. I've been reading a book every week for quite a long time now, and it's really changed and shaped my entire philosophy and my outlook on life. So that was really kind of where a lot of the fire started to burn, for like trying to figure out, hey, listen, there's an opportunity to get more out of life than what I've been putting into it here. So, I mean, that's really where it started to develop.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because again, one of the things I see a lot is that people, they like to say that they're going to do things, or they say that they want to change, but unfortunately, I see that it is this thing that is very rare that people actually take action, and that's why I'm so persistent on putting out content that evolves around that, and using myself as that example of putting it out there that it is feasible to read a book a week. And I kind of use that as, insert your variable into that. I thought I was a bad reader. I don't know if I've finished many other books than what was required from me in school on my own. So to be able to do that myself has been very, very helpful in my own life. And I love that you've been doing that for so long, and that you've given that to us as an example of going out there and exposing yourself to education at such a regular interval. And I think that's probably attributed to a lot of the success that you've had now.
Yeah, and you know what, Chris, one of the things that I do is I try to, multitask as best as you can. So what I do when I drive Uber, a lot of times I'll re-listen to an episode that I'm trying to, edit or figure out, because sometimes there'll be like a half hour, 40 minutes. So I get a chance in my ear while I'm driving Uber and making money. I'm also advertising the podcast, because I have the advertisements on the vehicle, and I hit everybody that comes into the car with a card. So it's like I get three things done at once. I can re-listen to edit, I can drive and make money, and I can promote the podcast. So it's things like that you stack on top of one another that helps you with your time management.
That's really interesting, because I've always varied vastly on multitasking, but I think when you implement it in such a manner because a lot of times what I mean by that is like when I'm focusing on one thing, I want to like do that and I want to do it 100%. But the way you're articulating it to us today is that you're driving, like I've given the example of other people, if you're listening, like if you're stuck in traffic, like I changed my mindset to think that traffic is now a blessing. And I'll turn on a podcast, whether it be real estate, whether it be something you were saying, or even my own podcast, which I love listening to better myself. And being able to multitask in that fashion, I think, is really beneficial. So it helps further instill the thing that I've been talking about a lot. So I do appreciate you saying that. And I think it's just like, what approach are you taking to it? How can I best utilize the time that I do have with me? And I love that you're out there and you have the cards, you have the marketing. You said it's like on the outside of your car or something, I'm sure. And you're able to do
magnets on the car.
Yeah. So being able to do all that stuff, I think you're just making the best of your time and your resources, which is really important. And I didn't know that you were also reading a book a week. So That's really interesting to me. And I have had a few people, I know you've had Grant Cardone on there as well. That's one of the people I think about that has a background similar that you've so graciously shared with us today, as having an addict background. And I had no idea that he did as well. And to be able to see success, to me, is part of the reason that I have a podcast, is to be like, this guy has this massive success now, but I think a lot of people don't know where he's come back from, or where he's come from to be back where he is now. So I love giving the example of you as well, where you have that background, but you're all doing all these things right now and you're able to be successful. And it doesn't just have to be one thing. Like, speaking of multitasking, you can still have your day job and do something that you're just so passionate about on your off time. And that's one of the things that I really like about that. Is there so you've had a lot of people. Is there a reoccurring topic that you've favored the most, that you've really, really taken to heart, something that you may not have known at all before, but you've seen it repeatedly come up in these people that you've just really resonated with you?
Yeah, and that's really the point that I drive home with the whole vision of the podcast here on trying to change the narrative of fatherhood and family life, is that I bring on these people who have just really crushed it in life, no matter what field they're in, whether they're Super Bowl MVPs or the world's strongest man, whatever it may be. SEAL Team 6 guys. These guys have just really put it on life. They've poured it on. And they say that despite all these things they've accomplished, it's really been through fatherhood that's given them the greatest sense of fulfillment and achievement in their life. And it puts a better testimony on what really, fatherhood is truly all about.
Yeah. I think that's really special to be able to do that, because you're right. I mean, they're doing top tier, tier 1 stuff. They're doing the top of the level, the best of the best things, and then be able to say that is the most greatest fulfilling thing that ever. I now know to be my answer as well, because being former Navy and then now having a 10-month-old is just is absolutely mind-boggling. And I know that I used to struggle with time management, or at least I thought I struggled with time management before. Where did all my time go? And then I'm able to still make it happen. So I do think that the same thing, going back to what Aaron said and how it's applicable to your show, is that if you really want to get something done, you can do it. And then you can also, your kids, I mean, it's like the moment I saw her just lit this fire inside of me. And I even remember talking about it publicly, that I thought I was motivated before. I thought I really wanted to be successful before, but now I just got this new fire burning within me. And it's been very, very helpful to just take my mindset to another level and understand the world around me truly. Has there been a most interesting problem that you've seen throughout not only this podcast, but you said your career, to where you slowly implemented this evolution of mindset through reading books and everything? Was there a point where you thought that you maybe wouldn't be able to continue in the fashion that you wanted to, or something like that, a problem that you had to overcome?
Well, I mean, there's been several problems to overcome, in my personal life. I mean, just on the journey of trying to get sober, one of the things that really set me back, I was sober for 2 years, 3 years, excuse me. And then my best friend since childhood, the first friend I ever made, godfather of one of my children, I'm the godfather of one of his, he committed suicide, and it really threw me for a loop, and it sent me back into that familiar place of alcohol. So I went to what was familiar because I had to give a eulogy, and I thought that, I'll just lean on this for now, and then I'll drop it again and get right back on the horse, on the wagon, and it didn't work out that way. So it's one of those things where I was lying to myself, and that's one of the things I think we need to recognize. And one of the things I recognized that helped me turn this stuff around was just that I was telling myself a lot of lies that I was believing, and until I started to tell myself the truth and realize what was going on, I had no chance to really turn it around. So, I mean, that's something similar to what you're asking there.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I think a lot of times it can be easy to lie to yourself. Even though you're lying to yourself, you're still telling you these things, and you just can't get past it. And it's really hard to come out of that. And I find that one of the ways that I get through that is by doing what we're doing right now, is to continue to share our story, no matter how many times we've shared our story. And then again, as a fellow podcaster, I mean, we've said these things many, many times, hundreds of times now, but I will say something for the 120th time and I'll see it in a new light. So that's what I think is special about being able to do that. And it helps me overcome that tendency to want to lie to myself about things, because when I continuously see them and say them out loud, especially, am I able to really fully understand them and continue to understand them in that new light that I see. So I really, really love that answer that you've given us there. And of course, we've talked about the importance of education quite a bit. And I like asking people about, what do you do to stay current? And I know one of the things you've already shared with us is reading a book a week. But are there any other behaviors that lead to this success that you've seen other than reading, or anything that you implement into your life to ensure that you stay current and ahead of the game too?
Yeah, I'm a very faith-based person too, so I keep God first in my life, and it's one of the things, whether it be, for everybody it's different, God, the universe, the source, whatever that may be, but for me it's God, and I keep that relationship first in my life, and that kind of helps to keep me centered with everything that I do. So I spend a good amount of the time during the mornings, whether you want to call it meditation, prayer, what so be it, but just in thought. I spend a lot of time in thought, and I've become a conscious observer of my thoughts and where they're going, and watching where they're coming from. And so I've kind of paid attention more to why I'm thinking, what I'm thinking, and then trying to control where I want my thoughts to go. And that's played a big part in my life. I mean, I never realized years ago how much thought actually played a factor in my life. I would never even have considered that. So that's something that's definitely snowballed into a massive amount of productivity for me, is just being able to control my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a lot easier said than done, isn't it? Is that something you've done, you said, every morning, right?
Yeah, you got to work on it. You got to be consistent with that, because it'll just get away from you. Yeah, it's of course it's a lot easier said than done. It's like Shakespeare said one time, like it's easier to be one teaching the 20 than to be one of the 20 getting the lesson. So it's always easier to say it than to do it.
Yeah, I think maybe does that help with being a podcaster as well, being a host, and being able to, obviously you are learning from each other mutually, from your guest, and your guest learns from you as well. I would assume that helps you grow as an individual as well. I feel like that's probably very much true.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's been really a blessing for me to be able to get so much advice from so many seasoned dads. Like my oldest is 13. My kids are right now, they're 13, 12, 9, and 5. And so I'll have, dads on the show whose kids are, have kids of their own, and they've been through all these different things in their life. So I get to ask them about how they handled when their daughters started dating, when their son started driving. We get to go into all of that stuff, and it's very beneficial for me. Yeah. And especially, too, as the years go on, to have this material to be able to look back into, and even though it'll be there for my kids when they get older and have kids of their own, to be able to listen to their father talk to so many of these amazing people about fatherhood as they're going through it.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. I said the same thing to my parents last night. They were asking me, I'm so full of gratitude that they're supportive, like they listen to my podcast, and it's so cool that they're able to do that. But I said one of the things, I said that exact same thing, is that my baby Kennedy, she's able to listen to that stuff, when she's older, and God forbid something that happens to me, she's able to learn so much more about her father than through a photo or something like that. So to me, it's so important on so many levels. And I think what is so the similarity between the podcast and reading the books is that you're of course reading or listening to somebody else's experiences, how they've dealt with something already. And that's what I love reading a book, is because this brilliant individual had all these experiences. Then I can just read that, and in just a week, as you and I are doing, I'm able to absorb all of that lifetime of an information. And I would agree that I would also answer that question in the similar fashion of being able to do that is just, I almost say it, and I'm going to ask you about, I want to talk about mentorship next, but I would say, before we even get into that all these people that I speak to and that you speak to and the books that I read are mentors in my life. I definitely feel as if I'm being mentored a lot of times just throughout my podcast. So if I can pose that question to you, have you had any mentors? And if you have, how have you come into them? Have you acquired them?
Yeah, not in the physical sense of having somebody present in my life as a mentor, but just like you said, I mean, I've been able to take. Now, here's one of the greatest things about technology, right? Because it could be just a burden, and you could just sit there and play Candy Crush or whatever the latest game is and just waste the day away. Or you can use this tool to get mentors right there. There's so much valuable information. So many seminars where years ago, like even Jim Rohn, I'm sure you listen. I mean, Jim Rohn's a guy where you had to spend a lot of money to go to one of his seminars. Now they're all available on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So are so many of these prominent speakers that you can actually sit there and listen to these lectures or listen to these speeches or presentations, and you can just listen to them over and over again for repetition. So I do things like that. And of course, my favorite interviews are the ones that I do with the Navy SEALs, just because I love their mindset and their philosophy. So I really, I'm like a sponge when I listen to those guys, and now I've developed relationships away from the podcast with several of them, and it's been really just made a major impact on my life. So I mean, I take a little bit from everybody, and I have the opportunity, like you do, to go back and listen to hammer the points home when I need to. So
yeah, I enjoy that. I still do everything myself. I edit it myself, and I like editing it, even though the time it takes a while. I still choose to do that because I'm able to go through so lethargically on purpose to be able to chop it up, and I'm able to really, really soak up that information, because I find that one of the things that's been difficult, and that I've had a question asked to me, is, okay, so you're reading a book a week, but how do you ensure that you're able to apply all this information? Because one of the things I say in the other segment of my podcast, where it's only me, I always finish it with, you can listen to all the best advice, read all the best books, and have all these best conversations, but if you don't apply it, it doesn't mean anything. So I know that when I'm able to go through these conversations and I'm able to edit them at this slow pace, it really helps me take that information and then figure out how I'm going to apply it to my life. Or when I read a book, I'll highlight positions or sections that I like, and then I can go back and I can skim it and find the parts that I liked and that I want to be able to apply. How have you found personally that you're best able to apply these things that you're learning from these individuals?
Yeah, I think it's a point what you said there too, is about taking action, right? Faith without works is dead, right? So it's, for me, this whole process started, I kind of put all this new philosophy to the test with the podcast, is really what I did. Because after I had read a number of books and listened to a number of seminars, it was time to put it to the test. And everything kind of came together at one time, because my older boys, they wanted to start a YouTube channel. Yeah. And I had started to look into trying to help them do that, and then discovered what podcasting was, which I didn't know. And, so then I said, okay, here's the opportunity to put all this stuff together. I have this idea about fatherhood. Here's a platform to put it out there. And really, I put it to the test of changing my mindset of my belief in the success of this and who I will be talking to. Because if you don't believe that these people are, because the number one question everybody asks me is, how the hell are you getting these people on your show? And it's like, if you have the mindset of, why would Deion Sanders want to talk to me? He's not going to want to talk to you. But if you have that mindset of, why wouldn't he want to talk to me and come on the show? You already opened the door to have the possibility to get him on. So it was changing my mindset of even reaching out to people. For every 10 that I reach out to, I get one that'll actually come on the podcast. So I've had 290 episodes. I've reached out to over 2,000 people. So it's like and I've been persistent on following up with the ones that I've gotten on the show. And now that I've got that ratio going, whenever I get the rejection letters, like somebody says, hey, thank you, but no thank you, I get excited because I know it's one step closer now, one more guy closer to getting the guest. So I've shifted the mindset in that way, and I've applied it in obtaining guests, developing these relationships and stuff like that. So, I'm somebody that went from, a small part of my story is I got, years ago, I got a lifetime ban from Giant Stadium. And fast forward, I was on the field at the Super Bowl for a media day interviewing the greatest player that ever played in Tom Brady. So, that's the kind of turnaround this has been for me, Kristof.
I freaking love that, man. I think that's so amazing how you can have that kind of turnaround. That's probably, I don't know if that's podcast appropriate, that story, but I don't know how you got banned, but I do love to hear about how you came back and you were able to interview those guys on the field there. I think that's both hilarious and awesome and inspirational that you're able to do that. And the mindset's so great. And again, that was such a parallel for me, is people have asked me as well, like, how do you get certain people? And I was like, persistence doesn't even begin to describe the amount of effort that I put out there to put, either whether they're direct messages, whether they're phone calls, whether they're emails, or however way. But it kind of ties back to what you were saying about your kids. Like, there's no excuse. Like, all this information is out there. It's whether you want to work for it, whether you choose to be persistent about it and maintain that consistency in what you want to do. But my numbers are very similar to like that, and I think that's one of the things, one of the reasons that I've had the success that I've had, and you've had the success that you've had, is clearly because of that, being relentless and just following up. But even more so, I don't want people to miss what you said about the mindset of, even when you get a rejection letter, because what you don't know is how many how many we send out that you don't hear back from ever, so when you do hear back, I love that, because I immediately make a note to follow up with this person on X date, and I know that I'm talking to somebody, and that's such a huge, like, if you're a fellow podcaster or content creator, that is like something to take away right here that Alex said, is like, then you're at least talking to somebody, you got some kind of grasp on there. Even if it's weak, you still have some kind of base to be able to touch right there. So I think that's brilliant, and I do know that that's one of the factors that's led to the success that I've seen here too. So I do appreciate you sharing that with us today. Wow, I've really, really, really enjoyed this so far. Do you see this continue? I mean, what kind of plans do you have for the podcast and for your own life? Do you see yourself continuing to work this day job, as you say, and then continuing podcast, or do you believe you'll see like a shift to just doing podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm about a year and a half into doing the show, and it's still very new. I still have a lot to learn. I still have to hone the craft. So I'm patient with the process. Yeah. My day job ain't going anywhere, so my role as father ain't going anywhere. So really in 2020, I plan on scaling everything up, trying to do some more, because one of the things that I didn't do until later part of the year was video interviews like this. So I definitely want to do more video interviews, maybe some on location interviews. I got a couple of books in the works for 2020. So I'm doing some speaking engagements in 2020. They've asked me to come and speak at Dad 2.0 down in Washington, D.C. in February. Very cool. I plan on just trying to really scale up and try to get the brand, put some more effort into getting the brand out there and all that.
Yeah, I think those are great plans to be able to do that. I really love the video aspect of the podcast. I've been doing it since day one. I don't even know why I made the decision, but I do know that I've been very happy with the decision, because I love being able to, quote unquote, look at somebody in the eyes, but having that personal interaction to me is much more important. And I think that's why it's a great idea. Like, just listening to you after just meeting you, that it would be phenomenal idea to be able to go out there and speak and just continue to integrate yourself within all this media and this content, writing books, meeting people in person, having video interviews. I think that'd be very beneficial. And I do think that would absolutely help scale the podcast, because I do completely agree that what you've said, why I asked you in the beginning, and what you described to us about who you are and what you're doing and what this podcast is and why you're doing it, I fully believe in that. And I believe more than ever in today's day and age that we need people like you that are going out there. We need strong men that are going out there and talking about fatherhood in such a sense like this. And I just align with it so much more. Like I said, after being a new father, like I see it now, I definitely see it firsthand. And I love that this is out here now, and that you're getting such people out there that people listen to, and then now people are starting to listen to you, obviously. So I love that you're doing that.
Yeah, and you know what it is too, Kristof? There's a major fatherless crisis in our country right now. So many kids are growing up without the benefit of having a father in the home. And wherever we see it, I know just last summer we had this issue with Baltimore, and people were pointing at like, oh, it's politics, it's economy, it's all this and that. But if you look at Baltimore, 70% of the teenagers are growing up in that city without a father in the home. Mm-hmm. And every one of these cities that we look at that have higher rates of drug use, higher rates of teenage pregnancy, suicide, crime, all these things, they all correlate with having a 60 or 65% rate of kids without a dad in the home. And the statistics are very overwhelming about the effects of it. So I think that if we can get more families strengthened and maybe get God back in our life a little bit more, I think most of the problems that we have in our country right now would start to just dissolve. So I think the fatherhood aspect is what I'm trying to point out, and that's why I'm trying to bring on all these guys to say, hey, look, how bad could it be if it's good enough for Tom Brady, or if it's good enough for Tony Hawk, or you listen to these guys talk about it. It means more than it does just the average Joe on the street. Because you know what, becoming a father, the best thing about it for me is it reveals more of who you are every day. With each new stage that your child gets to, it reveals something more about you that you have to deal with, especially when you have multiple kids. My 4 kids couldn't be more different than one another, and each one of them is teaching me something new about myself each and every year.
I love that. That's brilliant. I love that. It's sad to hear that the fatherless figures are so high, but that you're able to like I posed the question about education and learning, and I love that you're able to learn from your kids. And I do like how you mentioned that it's revealing, because I know definitely as former military, like being in stressful situations, that's where I was truly That's what truly made me a man. And even furthermore, to couple up with one of the other answers you gave about you like interviewing the Navy SEALs the most, and I was fortunate enough to be able to work with them for a number of years, and I know that was very defining. So that, coupled with being in stressful situations, was one of the most defining times of my entire life. And then I became a father, and the reason I say that is because now I'm in my own set of stressful situations. How do I be a good husband to my wife during these stressful situations, and vice versa? How do we maintain our relationship? How do we be a good parents to our daughter when we're stressed out, tired, hungry, all these other things? So I think we really see who we are in these type of situations, and that I love that fatherhood is able to bring that to me, and that you're able to learn from your children in that aspect and really find out more about yourself, because I know hands down, I can say without a doubt that I have definitely learned more about myself within the quickest year that I've ever had, because it has indeed been the quickest year I've ever had in my entire life. And I really appreciate you being here, Alec. But before we leave, where can everybody find you, find the podcast, and just more information about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere you can hear a podcast. iTunes is usually the most popular. iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify. You can Google First Class Fatherhood. You'll find some place where you can listen. I got the website, firstclassfatherhood.com. I mean, I'm on Instagram at Alec Lace, Instagram at First Class Fatherhood. I'm on Twitter. I'm trying to stay on Facebook as much as I can. I'm pretty much everywhere that you're supposed to be. I just started a YouTube channel and starting to upload content to there. So I'm going to try to focus on that in 2020. But, you put the name out there, you'll find me.
Easy day. Well, you guys will be able to find that in the show notes. Go ahead and find him, the #1 Apple podcast. I love what you're doing, man. And go over there on YouTube as well and subscribe to his channel. And I know as you continue to do the video podcast, there's going to be some amazing content out there. And it really is great watching these men talk about this stuff. So go ahead and check it out. All right, my friend, again, thank you so much for your time. This was really fun. I mean, this was just, we flipped it to automatic. We talked about a lot of different things. There's a lot of good content here. We went really far. We went really wide. We went really deep on some things, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Kristof, honored to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, have a good night. See ya.